And we're live. Hello, everyone. I was sitting here going through things. Normally, we start this pre-show part of our live stream of today's 220-1202 Core 2A Plus study group. And usually there's 10 minutes before where I get things ready and I check cameras, which we are doing, and we look at recordings, which we are doing, and we check the stream, which looks very good. But normally I start this like right at 10 minutes before, just because that's sort of what we got into. And I'm sitting here, it's now 9 minutes before, and I thought, there's something I'm not doing right now. What is it that I missed? There was a key piece of information that I am not here and providing. So I figured it out and pushed the button. Hi, everybody. We made it. This is day 2 of these. Hello, Mount. Good to see you. Hope things are going well. Good to see you early today. Somebody's in there and checking in early. You're doing much better than I am, apparently. Apparently. It is hot here as well. We've been in this high pressure bubble in Florida for the past week. It's just now starting to taper off, but it's like horrible rains every day. It is remarkable. It's summer in Florida, the way it works out. Hope everybody's doing well. Hello, chat room. Hello, everybody. We will get started here in about 7.5 minutes with today's Core 2 study group. Of course, we have all new questions from the exam objectives. We've got a lot to go through today. There's plenty. And of course, in the second hour, I will be taking your questions. If you want to submit a question at any time, you can go to, well, this link behind me, professormesser.com/QA, which is also where you ask the questions and you answer the questions. It's the same link. What could be easier? Would I say the contents are similar to the 1102? Well, if you look at the 1202 index on my site, I have a full and complete analysis of the differences between the 1102 and the 1202. The quick answer to your question is yes, they are very similar to each other. But there are differences. There are always differences between exam versions, and enough difference that if you were to study the wrong version, you will lose points on the exam, which none of us want. So that's the scenario for those different pieces. South Florida checking in. Hello, Cooper City. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Got folks here from New Jersey and South Carolina, Savannah. We've got Toronto. Hello, Canada. I will let Mrs. Professor Messer know that Canada has checked in. You're back from the holiday. I guess that was Monday, right? You're back from the national holiday. I guess it's more of a provincial holiday, isn't it? But everybody takes it. I'm not sure because I'm completely oblivious. Apparently, I'm just not really great at doing those things. So thanks for being here. So nice. We have family on both the east and west coasts of Canada. So it's always nice to see you folks in here. Indianapolis is here, in Texas, and Portugal, and DC. That is the District of Columbia. There's Huntsville, Alabama. Hello, Alabama. I used to live in northern part of Florida, which I really felt was sort of Alabama. I had kinfolk who lived in Marianna, Florida, which is just across the line from Dothan. So that's about, and of course, I've been all over Alabama for work. Bama, especially Huntsville. We did quite a bit of work in Huntsville. Firewalls and security and all of those things. So thanks for being here, everyone. I am just getting things started here. As many of you know, we did a live stream yesterday where we just had a normal live stream. And I normally don't have a live stream the next day because this month I had to rearrange my complete schedule. So we have 2 in a row this week and then 2 almost in a row the last week of the month. And then, of course, my plans completely changed, and I think everything is going to be pushed another month. So as it turns out, I made all of these crazy arrangements, completely unnecessary. Don't even need them. We could have stretched this out to be days apart. Did we do that? We did not. Because once you lock it in, I hate to change things, and it's very difficult once you lock it in to make it happen earlier, because I think that would be disruptive. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I just seems like it would be. So I'm just going to leave them where they are. We're just going to go through a couple weeks where we sort of, we have 2 bye weeks in a row. We'll look at it that way. and have that there. When will my 1202 sample exam, my practice exam book, be released? Well, it's currently in active production. As many of you know, we released our 1201 practice exams book over the past week, so it's relatively new. The 1202 needs updates as well. There's things that have to be done with that one, so we're working on those as well. We're getting there. There's some good stuff in there. And I like to bring everything in the exam up to date to the latest version. So I go through every single question, every single answer. I make sure there are no references to things that you no longer need to know about. I make sure the questions are accurate and apply directly to the exam objectives. And I make sure that they are the same distribution as the actual exam once you put all of the questions together. So all of this, most of the book happens in a big spreadsheet. Prior to even writing anything, there is a full and complete analysis of every single question, what's in it, what the answers will be. I sort of map it all out, and then it gets written. So that's why you'll notice it's a beefy book. If you've ever seen these practice exams books, it's kind of hard to see one. Let's see if we can do it this way. Here's practice exams book. This is the one for the 1102, the previous version, but the new version is going to be just as thick. I mean, there's 3 separate exams in here. There's a lot going on. So we are writing. It's a lot of fun this is a good time to do it too. I like the actual content creation part. There's such a mix of things that we have. You know, here I've got a website I need to manage. There's day-to-day things that we have to cover customer service wise. There is, you know, end of the month, you got to get some numbers together. There's a little bit of accounting work that has to be done. You have to make sure payroll goes. There's all those businessy things that you have to do. But I guess that's why I really like to sit down and make the content. So that's how that works. Do I get as much if the books are ordered on Amazon versus my website? Well, thank you for asking. You may notice that this question is self-answers itself because none of my books are on Amazon. You can't order any of my materials on Amazon. They are only available on my website. So that helps. That's really good. That helps a lot. So I don't have to worry about Amazon. Amazon does take a super big cut, like a monster cut. They are really good at what they do. The idea, I guess, really is volume. You make it up in volume kind of thing. That has not been my experience. So we have back in the day, if you go back, there were some books that I was putting on Amazon and I was selling them there. It didn't go well. It was just not my thing. So plus Amazon doesn't like the digital part of it. And a lot of people coming to my site want the digital book. And having the books in the format that I have as a Kindle version, it doesn't work so well. So that's why maybe the practice exams book would work, but it from a business perspective, it just didn't work out. So Amazon, maybe in the future, Amazon will work out. I'm constantly looking at those things. So that's where we go with that. We got 30 seconds to go. Joe in the chat room asked, is there a complete list of acronyms for the 701? There is. It's in the back of the official CompTIA exam objectives. Go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives security plus. Boom, you'll have it. And it's free. You can just do that. Should you wait for my new book? Yeah, of course you should. How dare you, sir? That's not what you meant. I know. No, I think it'll be out in a few weeks. So, and I don't want to say a few weeks. In the coming weeks, we will have the practice exams book available. The course notes are already available. You're going to hear all about that in the next hour anyway, because it's top of the hour, 12 noon, and we're going to get something going here, keynote, and we're going to hit the big green play button. Did that work? It did work, which means it's time for live stream, everybody. It's after time for a live stream. Let's get one started, shall we? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2025 Professor Messer 220-1202 Core 2A Plus study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And we get to see just how well you know some of this content. I think some of you are going to do pretty well on this and the questions we have today, but we have a bunch of new questions for you because there are new exams available. We'll talk about that in just a moment. If you are here live, we would love for you to be able to join us live and answer questions interactively in this live internet stream. You can do that by popping open a new browser window and heading over to professormesser.com/QA. Just put that in a tab and you'll have it available. That is the only URL you need to know. It takes you right to the question and answer, and you just stay on that page. And the questions will automatically update themselves on that page as we go along. So, in fact, there is a question right now out there. You can put your digital push pin into our map. There's people checking in from all over the world. You can see folks not only in North America, Europe, Africa. We've got our good friends in the Caribbean have checked in, and we got some folks up there in the northern parts in the Great White North. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is so much fun to do these live streams, and we really could not do this without you. There is also, let's put another question up. We're going to try out that link that I just gave you with this next question. We refer to this question as a question that is a rewind question. So this is a question from last month's study group. This is the only old question you're ever going to get because all the other questions are written brand new for every live stream. And the question that I have for you today is this one that asks, a company would like to block all file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Before we look at the answers, I want to make sure everybody is aware of our standing rules. The rules are please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to answer the question by following the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. That's the link right there at the bottom. That's the one we talked about earlier. That's the only link you need for this live stream. professormesser.com/QA. A company would like to block all file transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be SSO, IAM, DLP, SAML, or PAM? There's a lot of letters in this one. So we're going to come back to this question in just a moment. If you think you know the answer, you need to lock it in at that URL, professormesser.com/QA. Again, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will get to those in just a moment. We're going to come back to that question. Do not worry. We will be answering this one as we go through this. I want to thank everyone for being here. We do one of these live streams for each one of our courses every month. So this is the second of 4 that we will be doing in the month of August. Of course, when we're not doing these live streams, you can go look at our entire training course for A+. Not only the 1100 series, but the newer 1200 series is on our YouTube channel. You can go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a daily A+ pop quiz question that you can get on LinkedIn. You can see it on Twitter and X and Instagram and all of those great social media sites. Go to the one that's your favorite. You'll probably find our pop quiz questions there somewhere. Also want to let you know that sometime during the first hour, I hope I will be providing you with information on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then this probably does not apply to you. But if you are working to collect CEUs to renew your certification or to use it for some other type of professional type of work, then you can certainly do that. Maybe a continuing education type thing. You can use it for that as well. Just listen in during this first hour for that. Now, we've made some comments about versions of exams as we've already started this live stream, but let me bring you up to speed on where we are today with the A+ exams. For those of you that go back to April of 2022, you know that the versions 220.11.01 and 220.11.02, or what CompTIA is now calling version 14, are the previous and current. This is a current version of the exam, but it's one that was created or released in 2022. The important part of this is that it will be retiring on September 25th of this year. We're in August. We're at the beginning of August. This retires at the end of September. You have less than 2 months or so, I guess at this point, less than 2 months to be able to complete both exams to become A+ certified. Again, you have to complete both of them, and they have to be from the same series. So you can't take 1101 and 1202. You can't take 1201 and 1102. You must take 1101 and 1102. So if you are just getting started with your studies, this probably is not the exam series for you. We'll explain more about that in a moment. The exams themselves, when you sit down to take either one of these exams, each exam is 90 minutes in length, and you need to earn a 675 for the 1101 and a 700 on the 1102. Notice that the scale is interesting. The scale is from 100 to 900. They have an odd grading process, one that they don't share. So it's sort of a mystery on how they come up with that final score, but these are the numbers that you will need to work towards to be able to say that you have passed these exams. The exams themselves take not only multiple choice questions like the one we just had, but performance-based questions as well. And I have a pretty good performance-based question for you today. We do a brand new performance-based question every month. Now, there is a newer version of the exams, but both of these exam series are still current. As I mentioned, the previous exam series is still available until the end of September. But knowing that, CompTIA does not wait until September to release new versions of the exam. That would be quite a rug pull for everybody who's trying to study. Instead, in March of this year, they have already released the new exams. You could take them right now, the 1201 and the 1202, and what they are also calling the V15, the version 15 or something like this. So that's the real important part to know, because this version of the exam, since it was just released, doesn't retire until 2028 or so. Which means if you start this right now, you will have plenty of time to study for your certification. That's why I say that if you're just getting started with your studies, this is probably the version of the exam that you're going to want to focus on. That way you don't have to try to get everything crammed into a less than 2-month period, which is an aggressive schedule. And that's sort of understating it a bit. It's a very, very aggressive schedule if you want to be able to do that in 2 months. Again, everything's exactly the same as the previous version, 90 minutes per exam. You need to get a 700 on the 1202 to pass it. And regardless of which of these pairs of exams you take, once you pass the second exam, you are certified for 3 years. So it really doesn't matter what they do with the retirement date of the exam. Once you are certified, the exam means nothing to you, effectively. The important part is that you are certified for 3 years. They could change the exam every week if they wanted to. Wouldn't matter to you because you are already certified. Today, we're going to talk about the A+ exam, the 220-1202. The 1102 and 1202 are so similar to each other that the only thing I changed on this slide are the numbers for the exams. Everything else is exactly the same. The same format, the same structure, the same domains, the same domain names. Obviously, individual pieces of information within those domains has been updated. So they're not identical to each other. There are differences, and if you'd like to go through that in the after show, I'll be glad to do that, absolutely. Don't forget that this live stream will be available for replay immediately after we're done on YouTube. I also create a podcast version of this that is an audio-only version you can download and take with you wherever you go. And if you'd like to do that for any of our live streams, you can find that at professormesser.com/podcast. Also, if you wait about a day, you'll notice that our YouTube live stream information, the YouTube video description, will have these timestamps built into them. They don't happen automatically. We've tried. It doesn't work very well. You need somebody to go through this and physically write down all of these times, put them into the video description so that you can find the information you're looking for. And the person who gets to do that for you is my marketing manager, Lori. She's watching this on the replay, probably at 2x speed, and putting in all of these timestamps for you so that you know everything that you're going to get is completely accurate from a time and second perspective. You can simply click those and find exactly what you're looking for. Thank you, Lori, for doing these timestamps. And if you're someone who uses those timestamps, please give Lori a thank you in the chat as well, as she's watching the replay chat go by at the same time. Speaking of chat, we have, when we're not doing one of these live streams, we have our Discord chat. You can find me and thousands of other people who are studying for their A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus who have subscribed to our Discord server. You can find the link out to that at professormesser.com/Discord. and you can join us. You can create your own study rooms. You can be the boss of your own study room. You get to decide who's let in. You can kick people out of your own room. You have complete autonomy to do whatever you would like in your own individual study room. And of course, in our public rooms, you can chat with other people and ask questions about the exam. There's some really smart people in this Discord who can really point you directions and give you ideas about how to solve problems with this exam. Find out more at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually, you will need to take this exam. And if you are in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you can get the same voucher you would normally get on the CompTIA website at full price. You can get it at a discounted price if you go to professormesser.com/vouchers. This is a great way to get a discount without having any type of coupon code. You don't have to load anything into your browser. You don't have to register. You don't have to give me your phone number. It's just discounted. It's just an easy way to save some money when you're ready to take the exam. If you purchase the voucher from my site, to show you how happy and grateful I am about that, I even give you a little bit more, something you can't get anywhere else, which is my Exam Hacks ebook. This is a set of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years of taking these exams, some strategies you might want to be able to use during the study process, and strategies you can use during the exam itself to perhaps get you a few extra points. And who wouldn't want a few extra points on their exam? You can find out more about our vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. And for those of you that have purchased vouchers on our site before, we have thousands of people that have come through and gotten their vouchers from us. Thank you so much for your support. It really does go a long way to keep this crazy experiment on the internet up and running. We appreciate you. Let's go back to the question we asked about earlier. A company would like to block all transfers containing non-encrypted credit card information. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be SSO, IAM, DLP, SAML, or PAM? Let's see. All of these, by the way, are in the exam objectives. And you can see that we have an exact 50% of you that say the answer is DLP. But we have 20% of you that said SAML is actually what you would use here. 14% say the answer is SSO. 11% said PAM. And then you have 6% that said IAM. When you get into trying to find information about how to block certain types of data from traversing the network, especially when this data could be sensitive information, then you are looking for a data loss prevention solution. Sometimes this is a DLP functionality that is a standalone appliance. Sometimes this is built into your next generation firewall, or it may be clients. It may be software based, and you load that software on everybody's workstation. It examines the information being sent over the network, and it stops these data leaks from occurring. It's so easy to accidentally send out credit card information, social security numbers, and other sensitive information that you might want to have a solution like this in place to be able to block that. And I believe that if you are doing anything with credit card numbers, the PCI DSS, which I think we talk about in this version, that PCI DSS is one that requires you to be able to look for some of these things to be able to block them before those credit cards get out of the organization. So data loss prevention is what we were looking for. Indeed, that was the answer that we wanted. Wouldn't be SAML, which is really used as an authentication method, has nothing to do with blocking file transfers and the data within them. Single sign-on is an easy way to log into the network one time in the morning, and then you don't have to provide your credentials at all during the day, yet you still have access to all of the resources that you would normally need. That also has nothing to do with blocking file transfers and sensitive information. We have 11% said PAM. When you're dealing with any type of authentication, PAM is very important to be able to have something that is more modular. Many organizations will implement some type of PAM functionality within their software so that they're able to support a centralized authentication method. That has nothing to do with blocking file transfers. IAM is all about handling whatever type of permissions and access people have to important data and the things that they use every day. That also has nothing to do with blocking file transfers. The answer here, DLP, is exactly what we were looking for. If you want to know more about it, it's in my video 220.1202 in section 2.1. The name of the video is Authentication and Access. So that gives you an idea of things that you can look at. Now, that was a multiple choice question. This is one that I think many of us are familiar with. We get this throughout our college years, our high school years, our middle school years. If you've been to school, you've probably had to take some type of multiple choice question where they give you the question and then you choose what answer it might be. If you didn't know the answer, you could have guessed, and you had a 20% chance of getting it right. If there were only 4 answers here, that goes up to 25% chance of getting it right. CompTIA doesn't want to give you quite that much leeway. They want to see if you really know the content from the exam objectives. And so one of the things that they have done is introduce a new type of question on their exams that talk about the same content in different ways. So, of course, you still need to know everything about the exam objectives, but instead of asking the question as a multiple choice question and instead asking it as anything but multiple choice means that you have to know a little bit more about these topics. So it could be a fill in the blank. It could be putting you at a command prompt. It could be putting you at a Windows front end. You might be doing a drag and drop. You might be putting things in a particular order. There might be a sizing or putting things in from highest to lowest, fastest to slowest. There's a lot of different ways to ask questions, and they'll just come up with another way to do it. The important part is that everything you need to know for these performance-based questions comes directly from the exam objectives. As I often like to say, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question if you already know the answers. So if you know the exam objectives, they can throw these questions at you in any format they'd like. You're going to do just fine on this. You're not going to be surprised at all by this information. And of course, our very first new question on our study groups is always a performance-based question. Here is your performance-based question of the day. This is one that asks you from the Linux command line, and we're going to put this in on our systems. We're going to type this in at the prompt that I'm giving you at professormesser.com/QA. I want you to do these 3 things. I want you to determine the IP address associated with www.google.com. If you've not heard about these guys, it's quite a website. You'll really like it. I want to know what the IP address is of that. What would you type in on a Linux machine to be able to provide this? I could potentially accept 2 different answers here. There's one that I have in mind that's more Linux-ish, but it doesn't have to be that way because I didn't ask the question that way. You put down what you think that might be. The second thing I would like you to do is view the HTML of the service located at the IP address found in the previous command. Specifically, this would be a web service. So view the HTML of the web service located at the IP address found in the previous command. And then I want you to tell me to interpret the results of that previous command and tell me what you think about that. So this is a good one to have familiarity with. Hopefully you are familiar with these pieces. This is something that you can submit at any time. We just have an open screen where you can type some of these answers in by going to professormesser.com/QA. This would be a pretty good one to try. Now, remember, all of these commands are the commands from your exam objectives. Like many things in Linux, there are probably 10, 20, 100 different ways to do things in this operating system with many different utilities that have similar functions and many different utilities that you can install and third-party tools that you can add. Not interested in those. I just want you to tell me, based on the commands you need to know for this exam, which ones would you use in this scenario? So this would be a pretty good one to step through. And this is a question, we often have to do this in actual troubleshooting because very often you need to know things like the IP address associated with a fully qualified domain name. That would be how we would do that. And the answers are starting to come in. People are trying to figure out what you would use for this. I need to know the best possible way to determine the IP address. There's actually, I can think of probably 3 or 4 different ways to do it, but I have one that I think is the best way to do it. And so I'm going to tell you why I think it's the best way and what type of information we can get from it. It's interesting, though, how Linux provides you so much flexibility, yet we always seem to go back to the same utilities every time to do the same thing. So we'll have to see if we know what this happens to be. I think if we were in the process of studying for this exam, that you sort of get used to what those commands happen to be. And if you haven't seen them, they're in the exam objectives. There are quite a few Linux commands in the exam objectives, but make sure you have a look at those because it will give you quite a bit of information and things you need to know. And fortunately, a lot of the information in the exam objectives are the same between Windows and Linux. There's only a few, I shouldn't say a few, but there are a number of commands that are obviously very different, but there is quite a bit of overlap. So sometimes learning one helps you a lot with learning the others. Let's step through this question and see how you did with the commands that you would use for this. So the first question is determine the IP address associated with www.google.com. Now, the command that I used for this is instead of asking that service, because that service could be down, www.google.com could be inaccessible to us at this very second. Perhaps not Google, but other websites may not be available at this very second. So instead of asking the website what its IP address happens to be, a lot of people said, we'll use ping www.google.com, and we'll get an IP address back. Well, you're actually doing a little bit too much work because we don't need to ping the device. We don't even need to communicate directly with the device. Instead, we can perform a dig command, D-I-G. The dig command, simply the syntax here is dig space www.google.com. This will query your local DNS server or the DNS server that's configured in your system to determine what the published IP address is for that particular fully qualified domain name. So even if that particular web server was down, you would still know what the fully qualified domain name happened to be. This could be very important when you're troubleshooting, obviously, because sometimes the services that you're expecting to be there are not there. So it's always nice to have something that will tell you those IP addresses even when the service is unavailable. So in this case, I did run this dig command. Look at all the output for dig. There's a lot of stuff here. Let's zoom up a little bit on it. The dig command, it gives me information at the top that says, oh, you're doing a dig of www.google.com. Here's all of the parameters you're going to use for this command. And then it goes through the process of defining what is the question that will be asked. Well, it's www.google.com. And what was the answer that we got out of this? It is an answer of 142.250.217.228. Now, that's what it gives me. Now, obviously, Google does not have just one web server sitting in one data center with one IP address. Google has many data centers and many web servers. They probably have 2 or 3 of those that they work with. So you've got a little bit of redundancy there. So the IP address that you get may be very different than the IP address that I got. This all occurred in 13 milliseconds from a server that I'm connected to, which is the one at Cloudflare. Their DNS service is called 1.1.1.1. Now, I could have used other tools to do this. The other tool that I was thinking of is you could have used NSLookup. NSLookup is probably just as prevalent on Linux as dig happens to be. NSLookup has been around for a very long time. But NSLookup, we're not doing any additional development work on NSLookup. It is what we call in the industry as something we have deprecated, which means we have moved to a different utility, and we'll be expanding on that and supporting that. In this case, that different utility is dig. As if the web server was up, as I mentioned, you could just ping it. If you were to ping www.google.com, it will give you an IP address as part of the output of the ping command. But as I've already mentioned, you sort of just skipped over the process. It still had to perform a query to the DNS server to get the IP address. Why don't you just do that? Why do you have to go an extra step at that point? Rather inefficient. So NSLookup or dig would really be the best option for determining the IP address associated with google.com. Back to that original question, the second step was to view the HTML of the web service located at the IP address found in the previous command. So we're going from one command, we're using the output of that command to be able to give you something else. So we did our dig, and our dig gave us 142.250.217.228. And if we now want to view the HTML, I would do perhaps a curl command. Curl is the command that is in our exam, our official exam objectives. An important command to know that CURL actually does that query of the server and presents to you the results of that page onto the screen. And you can see there is information there that we can look at. We've got quite a bit listed on this screen. Can't see, I've got some information on my screen blocking it, but you can see that it's very short little HTML that's there. It says if we curl that IP address, notice that the information that comes back is just a little bit of HTML, not much that's there at all. That little bit of HTML that happens to be on the screen tells us, and we can actually see it, 301 moved. This is a 301 moved command that put it in here. This is HTML telling your browser, I know you're going to this IP address, but don't query our site by IP address. There might be other web services on that same IP address. Let's send you over to the actual fully qualified domain name. And it says this document is moved to http://www.google.com. That's where you need to go for that. Now, all this happens behind the scenes. You normally never see this HTML. It simply redirects you to this other page, and all happens so quickly you almost don't even know it occurred. You would really need to look at the raw HTML to be able to understand what just happened there. What did this do? Which takes us to the third question on this list, which was interpret the results of that command. Now, why would they have this redirect in the command itself that is, I'm going right to the IP address, just show me the IP address? Well, this is something that is commonly done with web servers. It's always more useful to reference the web server by its fully qualified domain name, especially on the server side, because the IP address that we have there, 142.250.217.228, could be supporting many, many other domains. And that's something that's commonly done, for example, web service providers. If you were to get really inexpensive web providers, you pay $10 a month for your website. They have that single IP address, but there might be 1,000 customers using that same IP address, each one with a different fully qualified domain name. And the way that you separate out where they need to go on that server is with the domain name that you're using to provide the original query. And so that's the way, that's how when you have 1,000 customers, it knows where to send your information to the right customer because you put in google.com instead of putting in professormesser.com. We could all be on the same server, but it's going to point you to the right place because you use the right domain name. The web server software takes care of all of that behind the scenes. Makes it very easy to do. And that's why they did a redirect here to get you to the right place. Sometimes redirects are done for other reasons. Maybe they did actually move where their site happens to be. Maybe they actually moved where a page happens to be. You can set up redirects on your web server so that people are able to access the information they need at any time. So being able to know what the IP address is, being able to query that IP address, and then see the results in HTML of that web server can now give us ideas of where we need to go to be able to solve a particular problem or troubleshoot an issue. Those are the answers we were looking for this month's performance-based question. I did look through a number of the answers we got here, and a lot of people use different commands. Curl was a very useful one. Some people did a wget. Wget, as I mentioned, Linux has a million different ways to do things, and that's another very popular command to be able to get information from a server. That's a perfectly reasonable command to use, but it's not part of the exam objectives, unfortunately. So no credit, well, half credit. I'll give you half credit for knowing wget, but half credit off for not using the one that is part of the exam objectives. Doesn't seem fair though, does it? Okay, full credit, because it's just fake numbers anyway. We're just learning. We want to know. In fact, getting things wrong is fantastic right now because I'm not giving you a final grade. Getting things wrong now helps you when you get in the exam room where you can get it right. On your exam, you will probably get a handful of performance-based questions. Usually it's 2 to 3 to 5. Sometimes people get more than that, but usually not much more than that. It's a handful of questions right at the beginning, and then the rest of the exam is multiple choice questions. So hopefully that gives you something that you can work on to be able to understand how to manage things at the Linux command line. Interestingly enough, these same commands, if you have a dig installed in Windows, or NSLOOKUP works the same. Curl and wget also will work in Windows. Those are easy to do if you have installed those utilities. So one of the problems with doing this question in Windows is a lot of those tools are not built into the Windows operating system. You would need to install those separately. They're out there and you can install them, but you need to plan ahead to have those tools available on your computer. Well, that's our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you learned something about Linux, or at least we're able to look at what we do when we're trying to troubleshoot these network problems. Now let's go back to multiple choice questions. And this next question is definitely a 1202 question. This does not apply to the previous version of the A+ exam. This question asks, which of the following would be the best example of an AI hallucination? Which of the following would be the best example of an AI hallucination? Would it be video impersonating a real person, a resume analysis favoring one demographic over another, a generated book text without a plot or a conclusion, a legal brief containing non-existent citations, or a generated image containing a tree with no leaves? There's a lot going on there. Which of the following would be the best example of an AI hallucination? A video impersonating a real person, a resume analysis favoring one demographic over another, a generated book text without a plot or confusion, a legal brief containing non-existent citations, or a generated image containing a tree with no leaves. All of these are things that you need to select from, all 5 of those options. One of them is the best option that describes an AI hallucination. So make sure you are familiar with these terms. There is a section on artificial intelligence on the 1202 exam. If you think you know the answer, please lock in your answer at the link you see here, professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to go to the link that is on your screen to be able to answer this question. Maybe it's one that you are already familiar with. AI hallucinations. A lot of people locking their answers in now, but not as fast as perhaps that earlier question. Whenever we get to new topics on the exam, it's one that we really have to think about a little bit. And I like to give you some of the newer topics on these live streams because you could get questions about this on the exam. This is a really good example of why, if you're taking the 1202 exam, you should not be studying from 1102 content. The 1102 content doesn't have anything about AI in it, yet there is an entire section in the exam on AI on the 1202. So it's an example of, if you're studying from the wrong materials, you could completely miss questions on your exam because of that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, which of the following would be the best example of an AI hallucination? Is it a video impersonating a real person, resume analysis favoring one demographic over another, a generated book text without a plot or conclusion, a legal brief containing non-existent citations, or a generated image containing a tree with no leaves? What did you choose in this scenario? Let's close our poll and see what you think the answer is. 56% of you say a legal brief containing non-existent citations would be the best example of an AI hallucination. I received an email recently that said, why are you calling it that? It sounds bad. We don't call it hallucination. AI is doing important things and you're demeaning it by giving it that name. I think people think that I came up with the name. It wasn't me. This is an industry term that AI professionals use to explain what AI is doing in the code. So this is a real term. It's an industry term. You will see it used all the time. I promise you, this is not something that I made up. Honest. Let's talk about AI hallucinations. This is when AI is very, very confident that it knows the answer, and it's very proud about the answer that it's providing. You asked AI, what color is the sky? And AI says, I have done amazing research about the sky. I know all about the sky. I am very familiar with the sky, and the sky is green. That is an AI hallucination. That is the AI it is very confidently incorrect. And it has no qualms telling you how proud it is that the AI is telling you that the sky is green, because obviously the sky is green. We all know the sky. That's exactly what it would be. So for example, I give this in my video, let's say that you have told AI that if you see a picture and the picture has a snout and a tail and 4 legs, that is a picture of a dog. And then you present it with a picture of a cloud, and the cloud kind of looks like it has a nose, and it kind of looks like it has a tail, and it kind of looks like it has 4 legs. So therefore, that cloud is now something that is a dog. That's not a cloud. AI will tell you, well, here's a very good example of a very fluffy dog. No, that would be a hallucination. That is AI that made it an idea, thinks that it knows the answer, and it's telling you absolutely that's what the answer is, and the things that have occurred. This is something that happens all the time. In fact, very embarrassingly, for both Google and Microsoft, they have introduced new AI technologies, and in the introduction of the AI technologies, they have a hallucination. In the introduction of it, the example that I like to give from AI hallucinations is one that is here for benchmarking of different AI tools. They went through to look at how well does AI know these things. And the big problem, or probably one of the biggest problems that people are having with AI, is the legal briefs. The legal industry itself is finding that to save time, the legal professionals, the lawyers and the people that work for them, are using AI to find different citations, which are used extensively in legal briefs. But AI is presenting citations that simply do not exist. But it's telling you all about them and how this particular citation solved this particular legal issue. And it answered this legal question. And here's the citation. It's Professor Messer versus Florida, 2025. This is what they determined. Like, I've never had a legal issue with the state of Florida in 2025, yet it came up with a citation for something like that. That's just one out of many, many, many examples of where you might find something like that occurring. That is exactly what an AI hallucination looks like. It is a legal brief. Example of it is a legal brief containing non-existent citations. 56% of you got this one absolutely right. There are other examples in this particular question that do describe artificial intelligence and some of the capabilities we have with this. For example, we have a number of different AI functions that can impersonate your video or audio, but that is not a hallucination. You have told AI to do that, and AI did that for you. It didn't somehow magically come up with your voice and your picture and create a video from that. So that is something you told AI to do, and it did it properly. So that's not a hallucination. Things like 13% of you said generated an image containing a tree with no leaves. Well, maybe it's winter. That's sometimes you have trees with no leaves. And if you told generative AI to generate a picture of a tree but don't put any leaves on it, that's exactly what it would do. Not a hallucination, at least not directly. We have 9% that said generate book text without a plot or conclusion. That's just basically generative AI, where it generated the text of a book for you. But as we found, AI is not really a very good storyteller at all. So I probably wouldn't use it for that. AI is good at some things. Telling stories, it's not that great. And then a resume analysis favoring one demographic over another. That is a different kind of AI problem. That is a bias, an AI bias. That is the official industry term that we use for that. Something that Amazon found very early on when they were putting all of their resume information into AI. AI started only pulling out certain types of races as people they would hire. Probably not what the AI should be doing, because there were lots of great resumes, but it started picking certain terms that focused it in a single direction. And it just happened to be that's what those terms ended up being. So you really have to be very, very careful when putting a bunch of data into AI, because it will very much tell you that it is absolutely right and here's the answer, when in reality, made it all up. Just made it all up. So something, AI is not perfect. It's nowhere even close to being perfect at this point. And it's something that you should be aware of, especially if your organization or yourself is using AI to do anything of importance. You want to be very careful about that. You did a very good job, though. 56% of you got that absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another question. This one also a 1202 question. This would not apply to the 1102 exam. This next question asks, a laptop is configured with Windows 11 N edition, N as in November, N as in Nancy. Which of the following would describe this Windows edition? Would it be designed for mobile devices, requires an Active Directory server, media player is not installed, network features require activation, and it's upgraded from Windows 10. One of those descriptions describes a laptop that is configured with Windows 11 N edition. N, the letter N. I'm not saying IN, I'm saying the letter N. N is in November edition. So feel free to submit your answer. Use the URL that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Tell me what you think the right answer is for something like that. This is one you should absolutely know. I don't want to give too much away. I'm not going to say, not going to say anything. I almost said something that kind of points the other direction to be able to give that. I don't want to give too much away from these, especially since these are topics that are new. This particular question is a topic that is new to the 1202. That previous question was one as well. But this is an important consideration. The exam, you'll notice if you go through the exam objectives, they have kind of shifted where the things are you need to know. They've sort of changed where the important pieces are. And I like what they have done with the newer exam. It seems to focus more on practical uses of operating systems and troubleshooting of those. And I like that. Anytime we move to more of a practical use instead of just rote memorization, I like that. I think that's very useful. Let's see how you did with this one. A laptop is configured with Windows 11 N edition. Which of the following would describe this Windows edition? Is it designed for mobile devices? Does it require an Active Directory server? Is Media Player not installed? Do the network features require an activation? Or has it been upgraded from Windows 10? Let's find out. We're going to stop our poll and see how you did. 58% of you say that Media Player is not installed, which seems odd to me. We'll look at that in a moment. We also have other questions or other answers with double digits. 15% of you said network features require activation, and 14% of you say it requires an Active Directory server. And then in the single digits, 8% of you say that it has been upgraded from Windows 10, and 4% of you say it has been designed for mobile devices. I like the upgraded from Windows 10 one. It's more of a scarlet letter defining you as someone who ran Windows 10, and somehow we stick a big N on the side just so we know, oh, you're a Windows 10. That's not what happened at all. In fact, if we look at the answer, the 58% of you got that one absolutely right. In Windows N edition, there's no media player. No media player. Why would you not have a media player in an operating system? Well, I'll tell you why. I can bring in the cocky United States view of the world, where we say it's because of those Europeans. That's what happened. This was a court case that described the use of media players and how the competitiveness of media players is an important consideration. And in Europe, they said, Microsoft just can't put a media player in your browser or in your operating system because other people who want to create media players and sell those as a company want to have the option. They don't want you to lock them out. They saw, for some reason, this is what they grabbed onto, was media players, the things that are completely free everywhere else. They felt that was the hill that they were going to die on. And they said, Microsoft, you can't sell any Windows in Europe unless you get rid of the media player. And Microsoft said, oh yeah? Okay. That's fine. I don't make any money on the media player. All right, we'll do that. And we'll call it Windows Media Player. Without media player, we'll call it Windows N edition for not having media player. That's what the N stands for. I don't know what the N stands for, but that's what they did, was put that in there. And the interesting part is, of course, you can always still add the Windows Media Player if you really, really like it. Although if you're like me, the first thing you do, even in the United States, where the media player is built into the operating system, you just download VLC anyway. We all do it, so I don't know that it really helped that much, but if they feel good about it, it doesn't hurt anybody. And so that's what the N stands for. So those of you that answered media player not installed, that is exactly the answer we were looking for. Currently, there is not a Windows edition completely designed for mobile devices, although in the last month, Microsoft did announce that they were creating a slimmed down version of Windows 11 that would be, at the very beginning, designed for mobile gaming platforms. So they're really looking at attacking that very small handheld gaming market. And it's not even very small now. It's growing very, very rapidly. For example, we had the Nintendo just released their new Switch 2, right? This past month. So there's a nice big screen and a set of joysticks and a nice gaming platform. We have similar things on the Steam Deck. So they want to make a slimmed down version, but they don't have that yet. So it's not designed for mobile devices. 8% of you said upgraded from Windows 10. I've already told you we don't judge. You came from Windows 10. That's fine. I came from Windows 10. So of course that is fine. And it's not an in version for that. The network features do work even though you did not activate Windows. That's pretty normal. And then we have 14% that said require an Active Directory server, that you at least need the proper edition of Windows to connect to an Active Directory server. Usually that would be the Pro version and above. But in this case, the in version does not have anything to do with Active Directory, has everything to do with Media Player, and that's why the answer is 58% of you say that Media Player is not installed. You got it absolutely correct. Well done. That is what we go. That is a good one there. People in the chat room are saying, well, what about Windows Phone? We don't have Windows Phone anymore. It's interesting, though, that Microsoft now has also said something I read over the last number of months. They said, oh, we probably should have stuck with that phone. We probably should have kept it. It would have been a real player. And they're not wrong. I think it would have been a real competitive market there with a third phone manufacturer in there. They had the resources, and they really had not a bad operating system for their phone. I really liked it. Now that they're seeing everyone wanting to game on a portable system that is really Windows, I think they're thinking, oh, we could have done that. It could have been Xbox on a phone. They missed it. Well, it's never too late, right? Go for it. You can make it happen. Something that's there. One of the things you'll notice about these questions that we've covered so far is there's a lot of topics on this exam. In fact, if you look at my videos for the A+, it's 137 videos, 19 hours of information. And that's because there's so many different topics to cover. You've got hardware and security and networking and operating systems with Linux and Mac OS and Windows and the different editions and troubleshooting and the command lines. You have to know all of this to earn your A+ certification. This is not a walk in the park. One of the things that I wish everyone would do is to watch every single 137 videos, perhaps even multiple times. Well, for someone who's a YouTube creator, we can only hope. But it's not very practical, is it? And why would you watch a video when it covers a topic you already know? But wouldn't it be nice if you had some way to verify that you knew that information, or to have everything that was in the video all available in one single publication? In fact, we have that in our course notes. This is a copy of my PDF course notes, every bit of text, all of the graphics, all the important charts, they are all in this document. They are organized by video in the same order as the exam objectives, which means that you can find exactly what you're looking for whenever you need it. So this is a very comprehensive set of notes. So if you like to take notes yourself, great, use those notes. But if you find that you're missing information, or you would like to have a set that really covers everything so that you can concentrate more on learning the content rather than concentrating on writing down the content, these notes might be for you. We have these course notes available for our Core 1 and Core 2 exams. Make sure you get the right copies, because obviously right now there's the 1101 and 1102, and there's the 1201, 1202. But if you buy both of them, you get them for a discount, which is always good too. And we have physical copies. There's the 1102. Where's the 1202? Right here. There we go. 1202 book. So it is a full color book. It is printed and perfect bound, which is what they use on paperback books, and available in this beautiful color front end with that guy on the front. Where is he? You can't see his face. What's he doing? He's in there. This is something that's identical to the digital version, but sometimes it's nice to have it in a printed form. If you purchase the printed form, we ship this out to you, and you get the digital form. You get the digital version, the edition of this for free. So you don't have to pay anything extra. Once you buy the physical version, I go and we start printing it up and we start shipping it out to you, but you can download the digital one immediately and start reading through it, because that's important information to know. If you want to know more about that, you can find it on our website. Go to professormesser.com/1202notes, and there'll be something maybe you can help as well. Now, if you already have the digital version and you would like to upgrade to the physical one, just open up a help desk ticket on our website. I really should put a link right there in your member side so you'd be able to do that easily. That'll give me something to do this weekend, right? We'll make that happen, but I can easily provide you with the instructions and coupon codes if you would like to upgrade to the physical edition as well. Something that does help us, so thank you so much for your support here. And for those of you that have already purchased the course notes, we also thank you as well for your support. Let's do another question, shall we? We got time. So this is a question that asks, a company would like to improve security during the login process. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is this least privilege, proxy, TOTP, developer mode, or NTFS and share permissions? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. I'm going to take a sip here real quick. Oh, very dry. I always pump up the air conditioning when we're doing a live stream because there's all these lights and there's things happening and there's more equipment turned on. It takes a toll. So we will make it though. We're in better shape now. If you think you know the answer, there's your link, professormesser.com/QA to lock it in. Some folks in the chat room were asking not only about the course notes, but they're saying, hey, what about practice exams for the Core 2? Are those coming? They are coming. Do not worry. They are in active production right now. This is the previous version of those practice exams. We will have practice exams in the coming weeks for the 1202. So they're right around the corner. We're looking forward to publishing those and having them available to you with all new content specifically written. Not all new content, but content that has been all edited and specifically written for the 1202. So you will never see old, outdated, unnecessary topics in our study materials. We get rid of all the old stuff that you will never be asked about on the exam, and we put in all new stuff that you will be asked about on the exam. It's remarkable how many study materials out there right now for the new exams are still asking about old content that has been removed from the exam. Happens every time we go through this, though. So I think that's one of the reasons that people tend to rely on our training materials. Not only are they written by somebody who's already been in the field and already been doing this and worked as a systems engineer and implemented these operating systems and security and networking, but it's also accurate for the things you need to know so that you can have the best possible training materials to pass your exam. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company would like to improve security during the login process. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be least privilege, proxy, TOTP, developer mode, or NTFS and share permissions? What did you answer? Let's find out. We'll close the poll. And 59% of you say the answer is TOTP. But we have a good number of double digits up here. 16% said least privilege. 13% say proxy. 11% say NTFS and share permissions. And only 1% said developer mode. Sorry, developers. Maybe next time. The real key to this question, and something that is very important when you're taking these exams, is sometimes the entire question is reliant on a single word. This does happen in these, and you have to be very careful about what you're reading so that you don't miss any of these important words. In this case, we have two words that are super important. The two words are login process. We want to have improved security when we log in. And because of that, we're going to focus on TOTP as the correct answer. 59% of you were correct. Absolutely correct in what you were doing. TOTP is a time-based, one-time password algorithm. You've probably used these before. You probably have an app on your phone, and when you log into PayPal or you log into battle.net or you log into your stockbroker, you are asked not only for a username, not only for a password, but also a bit of random numbers and information that is provided from the app that is on your phone. This is a very good example of an app on my phone that gave you the number. So I'd log in with my username, my password, and then on the login screen, it says, all right, what's the number, mister? The number is 74370779. We even have other apps these days where you don't have to type anything. It just, your phone pops up and says, is that you? Can we log in? Yep, that's me. Click. We'll do it that way. So that is a very good one. This topic does apply to both the 1102 and the 1202 exam. So if you answered this one and you're studying for the older version of the exam, good for you. Got it absolutely right. This is one that seems like it's random numbers. If you were to watch it, it changes every 30 seconds or so, in most cases. Because it is time-based, it changes constantly based on the time of day. And it's originally synchronized, and then it keeps track of those synchronizations. But the back-end process, the server, knows what the last number is, it knows what the current number is, and it knows what the next numbers are going to be. It's not really random. It's just seemingly random to us humans. The reality is, of course, that we've got ways to look at this information and be able to interpret what it's doing by having these standard algorithms. It's one that's very, very useful for authentication because it really does confirm that you have your phone with you. And if you are in control of your phone and you've logged into your phone and you're able to access that app, then you must be the person who's logging in. That adds additional security to the login process, and that's why TOTP was the right answer in this particular question. 16% of you said least privilege. Least privilege is a set of rights and permissions assigned to you once you log in that limits what you can do on the network or on that server. This is something that ideally would give you just enough permissions to be able to perform your job function and no more. That way, you are very limited in what you can do, and that way will also make the network more secure. But it has nothing to do with the login process. That is a set of rights and permissions that are assigned after the authentication process. This would be more of an authorization, not authentication. We also have 13% that said proxy. Proxies are great for limiting what information is sent across the network and limiting how your particular security of what you're accessing across the network. But a proxy does not help with security during a login process. In fact, we don't like to use proxies during login because it's way too easy for an attacker to put their own information in as part of the proxy. In fact, it probably would be a bad sign if you saw proxying going on during the authentication process. 11% of you said NTFS and share permissions. Again, these are permissions that are assigned once you log in and therefore would not provide any additional security during the login process itself. And developer mode is a feature that's commonly built into applications, into devices, that gives you a little bit more information about what's happening behind the scenes with that application or with that device. It's not used at all during the login process. So therefore, TOTP is the answer that we were looking for. Hopefully that's one that you're familiar with. If you're watching this video, by the way, for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that would be able to provide you with a single webinar category CEU. Get the category right. That webinar category CEU can be used and applied towards upgrades or updates to your existing certification. So this is something that would apply if you're already certified. If you would like to receive an email that certifies that you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU, you must follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put August 2025 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put this month's super secret code words of the month, TOTP developer mode. Those are the super secret code words of the month. Then you just send that to me. And in about a week or so, turn these around. You'll receive an email from me that has been digitally signed that certifies that you are here for 1 hour of this webinar category CEU. Again, the process is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, you click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put August 2025 Core 2, something close to that. And then in the body of the message, this is one you have to get exactly right, put the super secret code words of the month, TOTP developer mode. And then I'll know that you must have watched this because you knew the super secret code words of the month. Now, I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can squeeze in another question, shall we? This is a question that would apply also to both the 1102 and the 1202 exam. This question asks, a user's browser is displaying a certificate warning message. Let's do that again. A user's browser is displaying a certificate warning message when visiting a specific website. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Would it be the website's default gateway is incorrect, The browser needs to be updated to the latest version. The browser is running on an encrypted file system. The website name and certificate name do not match, or the user authentication is incorrect. It's got to be one of these. If you think you know the answer, there's your link. You've probably heard this before. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know about this. A user's browser is displaying a certificate warning message when visiting a specific website. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? The website's default gateway is incorrect. The browser needs to be updated to the latest version. The browser's running on an encrypted file system. The website name and certificate do not match. And the user authentication is incorrect. It's got to be one of those. We have to know what some of those happen to be, if you happen to know it, or you just want to take a guess. You can put it in at that link, professormesser.com/QA. See if you know what that link might be. This should be a good one to sort through. Maybe you're familiar with certificate warnings. If you're not, in the video I provide for this, I give you a website you can go to try out some of these certificate warnings, which I find just fascinating sometimes to see how different browsers handle different types of errors and warnings. They've gotten much better and more consistent recently, which is great. I think we put a big emphasis in that, basically in the industry, making sure they are consistent to everybody else. Let's see how you did with this one. A lot of answers came in quick. The question again asks, a user's browser is displaying a certificate warning message when visiting a specific website. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this issue? Is it that the website's default gateway is incorrect? The browser needs to be updated to the latest version. The browser is running on an encrypted file system. The website name and certificate name do not match. And the user authentication is incorrect. Ooh, which one of these could it be? Let's see what you chose. And 82%, a very large number, say that the website name and certificate name do not match. And then everything else is single digit. So we have 8% that said the browser needs to be updated to the latest version. 5% say the user authentication is incorrect. 2% say the browser's running on an encrypted file system. And 2% also say the website's default gateway is incorrect. If you ever see these certificate warnings pop up, you as an IT professional, someone who's familiar with networking, some of you familiar with web servers, you're familiar with security at this point, you should take special attention and care to understand why you received a browser alert message, a browser notification. Normally, you should never see these. And if one pops up, that should be something that should be very important for you to look at. You need to understand exactly why you received this message. All too often, users simply get the message, they click through, yeah, okay, whatever, click, and they just keep going. In reality, though, they could be putting themselves at a great deal of risk. So that is a very good example of why these types of messages are so important for you as the technical professional to understand, because the users will just simply click through it and hope for the best. I have a great story about this. We can talk about it maybe in the after show, about how an organization of thousands of users had to click through for a week and nobody reported any problems. It's quite remarkable. So what you want to do is look at the certificate details. Different browsers have different ways of doing this. It may be that you click the lock icon. Maybe you have to go to a separate set of menus to see the certificate details. And it will tell you as part of the error what the problem is. So it might say in the error, let's zoom up on this, shall we? Here we go. So way too much. Come on back. There we go. So your connection is not private. That happens to be the message we saw here. That's just one example of many different kinds of messages you would receive if there is a certificate problem. And it says attackers might be trying to steal information from a self-signed certificate. This one is from a site called badssl.com. It's not that kind of site. This actually does show you a lot of different types of SSL messages. Just so you know, badssl.com. There it is. And if you go to that site, this is what it looks like. Here's badssl.com. These are all of the different SSL errors that you could get. If a certificate is expired, if it's the wrong host, if it's self-signed cert, if it's an untrusted root certificate, if the certificate has been revoked. These are things that it will give you the message on your screen if you run into this type of problem. So for example, you've probably been to a website where they forgot to update and renew their SSL certificate. So it's expired. So if I click expired, it tells you it's not private and it says cert date invalid. Gives you that information. Let's go back and let's do another one. Let's do one where it's been revoked. The owner of the certificate has revoked that certificate so that no one else can use it. I'm going to click that. Notice the message is different. It's very similar at the top. I'm running Safari on my side. So this is a Safari error message that says your connection is not private. They can steal your message, but the error message is different. Its error is cert revoked. So that is a different kind of error than the one where it expired. Well, the expiration was somebody who just forgot to renew. But the one where people went through the process of revoking the cert is something you would administratively do. So you want to carefully look at these alarms, these alerts, these messages that come up, because these could be a significant security concern. Because if an attacker is trying to spoof your domain or trying to redirect users to their own website, your browser will tell you very often that they are doing that because these types of checks and balances are built into your browser as it's associated with the fully qualified domain name and the certificate that has been built on that. So make sure you are familiar with those challenging problems. If you were to run into that, that is something that you as the IT professional will be relied on to understand more of this. So the 82% of you that said the website name and certificate name do not match, it is a mismatch. It is one that, in fact, we should probably do one of those, right? Let's see if I can go back to my error. Well, what if we had a mismatch? What would bad SSL tell me if I had a mismatch? Let's get rid of some of this information on the screen so we can, or maybe not. Bad SSL, I clicked the wrong thing. Let's do a mismatch. It is the wrong host. That's what a mismatch happens to be. Oh, it's not even coming up on my screen. It's just circling. Oh, there it goes. So cert common name invalid. And it went to wrong.host.badssl.com. So if somebody tried to go to www.professormesser.com over an encrypted connection, except the certificate was really for www.professormesser, maybe it's spelled differently, .com, it would give this message saying, wait, you typed in one thing, but the certificate says it's something else. That's a mismatch. We need to make sure you're aware of that, and we can do that through that particular error. The website name and certificate name do not match. That's when you would get that very specific error. That is one where I think we don't spend enough time explaining to users how important that particular message is, because very often they just run right through it. They just go immediately right through the problem. And you have to go back and look through the error log, go back through the event viewer to see what did they see? What message did appear on their screen and why is that appearing? Sometimes certificates can be confusing. So it's helpful if you break everything down, put everything in front of you and really understand what's going on. Might even take a couple of protocol decodes. You may need to capture some packets. You might have to grab information from a log. Pretty important to understand those types of things. Hopefully that's given you something to think about. We now are well into the last hour of what we are doing today. So let me tell you that everything we have gone through today comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I've said that a number of times, but that's because this is such an important document. This will tell you everything you need to know to pass this exam. If you know everything in the exam objectives, there's nothing more I can do for you. You have all of the knowledge you need to be able to earn your certification. That's how valuable this utility or how valuable this document happens to be. And it's a free document. I have a copy of it here we can look at. Let's see if I can pull this up on my side in my preview. So here is the exam objectives for the 220-1202 exam. And just for example, here's the first section, explain common operating system, OS types, and their purposes. It goes through Windows, Linux, Mac OS, Chrome. We have to know mobile operating systems like iPad OS, iOS, and Android. We also have file systems in here, NTFS, REFS, FAT32, EXT4, XFS, APFS, and exFAT. Oh, we have to know what all of those are. More importantly, we have to know when would you use one over another. That's what you would have available to you. So something to think about. We also have end-of-life considerations, update limitations, and compatibility concerns between operating systems. So there's a very good example of why you need to be able to have this information at your fingertips. These are your exam objectives. They go on and on, pages and pages and pages and pages of this information. In the back, a list of acronyms, which is pretty convenient too. All these acronyms are here. So you've got a great deal of very, very, very valuable information. Make sure you take advantage of that. Go ahead and search for the official exam objectives in your favorite search engine. Make sure you've got them that are applicable towards the exam you are planning to take. So if you're taking the 1202 exam, make sure your exam objectives clearly have stated on them 1202. Make sure you are studying from materials that match the version of the exam that you plan to take. Incredibly useful. We do one of these study groups for each of our training courses every month. We did our Core 1 study group yesterday. Our Core 2 study group is right now. Of course, we have other study groups that are happening throughout the month. We have a Network Plus and Security Plus study group at the end of the month. All of this is in our calendar. So you can always find out when the next live event is going to be by visiting the URL that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/calendar to be able to know when the next event will be in our calendar. And I keep that updated on a second-by-second basis. If I have to make a change to our calendar, that's where I make it first. So you will know exactly the latest information when you go to that URL. Notice that I have chosen some times and dates for next month. I'm not so sure I'm going to keep those. This might be a very good example of me changing dates and modifying the calendar. So before we get to those dates in September, make sure you check the calendar so you know exactly when that is going to be. Well, we made it through an hour of Q&A already, but we're not done. I want to answer your questions coming up next in our after show. Stay right here where you are. We will be able to take those questions at any time. And of course, you can submit those questions by going to professormesser.com/QA. Don't forget about our course notes. We also have practice exams for Core 1 and practice exams for the older Core 2 on our website. You can find those at professormesser.com/1202success. We also have our discounted vouchers and our exam hacks ebook that you can only get with a success bundle or with a discounted voucher. You can find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, we're all over the internet. If you are on the internet, we want to be where you are. So it might be on X, it might be on YouTube, it might be on Facebook, it might be on LinkedIn. Just type in professormesser.com/Facebook/LinkedIn/ whatever it happens to be. You'll find us there wherever you are looking. Hopefully we're going to be there too. And if we're not at that site where you are, let me know and I'll make sure that we get to the site where you happen to be so that you always have access to this important information that will help you pass your A+ exams. Well, that brings us to the end of our first hour. Thanks for joining us. We will be here in about 10 seconds, starting our after show. We thank you so much for joining us in this first hour. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay. We'll take a sip. One moment, please. We're going to make this happen. Let's do me. Let's get rid of pictures of me on the screen. Let's bring this off and let's bring me back over. Nope, that's the wrong one. There we go. Back over here. Hi, everybody. It's time for the after show. This is the part where I want to get your feedback. Instead of me asking you questions all this time, what if you could ask me some questions? That's what we do in our after show. You can submit your questions at any time by visiting the URL that you see on your screen. You can go to professormesser.com/QA and ask whatever question you might have. I'm going to flip around on my side and see if I can find information that we might want to look at. Got a lot here to go through. Boy, there's a lot of details on this screen. I was just looking at the different bad SSL connections that we had there. I was looking at. That was pretty good. Had a lot of good details there. Let's now go back to the questions that you have submitted. I'm going to go back to my Vevox front end here, and I am going to have a look at the QA that you have submitted. We've got quite a few here. If you would like to submit questions, you can do those at any time. One of the ways that you can make that happen is in this second hour. You can now submit those by going to professormesser.com/QA. I will be queuing these up behind the scenes so that you can easily submit these and then just forget about it. I will take it from there. It's so easy for you to work through those pieces of it. So it will not show on your side, and it won't show on the screen immediately until I click a few buttons on my side and bring it to the forefront. So that gives me a chance to sift through them and find the best possible ones that we can submit. I mentioned earlier about these scenarios where someone would see an SSL problem on their screen. They'll get a message in their browser. And this is something that happened with an organization I was working with that was a school system. And they wanted to do SSL decryption. SSL decryption. Now, I'm saying SSL for those of you that like to really go into the details of this. When we say the words SSL in this industry, we're using those terms because they're very easy to say. In reality, we have upgraded SSL. We have effectively deprecated SSL, and we have replaced SSL with TLS. So secure sockets layer is now a more transport level encryption, but it's basically the same thing, just upgraded. We put a new name on it to make sure that everybody understood that this was very different than the older version of SSL. The problem, though, is that even though we are installing TLS, we are running transport layer security on these systems. We have configured our web servers with TLS. Our browsers know about TLS. We still call it SSL. So as I talk about SSL, that's what I'm referring to. Really referring to TLS. So every time you hear the words SSL, 99% of the time, we really do mean TLS. Well, with this school, they wanted to do SSL decryption. They wanted to do TLS decryption. The way that works is it sets up within a firewall a proxy process that effectively terminates SSL on the firewall, performs another request out to the site that is a differently encrypted configuration, decrypts it inside the firewall, examines it to see if the information in this decrypted form is valid and does not contain anything malicious. And if everything works out okay, it re-encrypts it and sends it on its way to the end user. Sort of a separate extra step you have to go through to be able to see what normally would be encrypted data, and you're able to see this data in the clear behind the scenes inside the firewall. So that is what SSL decryption does. Now, if you don't configure this properly, every time somebody visits a website using SSL, using TLS, they're using HTTPS in their browser. Every time that happens, if you configure it incorrectly, you will get a mismatch error because you have not configured your certificates properly on the firewall. Well, this happened with this particular person, this particular user, is they said, SSL decryption sounds great. But this is after I had already set up the firewall, I had configured it, we set up some rules, and I left. And after I left, they started playing around with it and said, SSL decryption sounds amazing. Let's turn it on. Click, and they did. And it did SSL decryption. It worked. But every time somebody would visit a website, it would give an error. So this went on for a week. I came back a week later. I said, hey, good to see you. How's your firewall running? What do you think? Did it work well for you? Let's look at your statistics. It said, yes. And let me tell you, I turned on that SSL decryption. That was phenomenal. I was able to get a lot of information out of that. I thought, we didn't configure SSL decryption. Your thousands of people in the school system for a week have been seeing an error message pop up and nobody called. Nobody said anything. There were no help desk messages. Nobody said it offhand that there was an issue. Nobody had any comment about the SSL mismatch in their browser. And it was happening for a week. And it was just an interesting story that had me learn a lesson about security and how security is perceived and how important it is and how people react to different things that are on the screen. Because what they did is goes, yep, continue, yep, continue, yep, continue. And it worked. Yep, continue. We'll just keep continuing until everything works. And it did. And it worked. They just kept continuing. They had no idea why it was giving an error. They just know that there was an error. So we fixed that problem. We created the proper certificate for it. And after that point, we were able to do the SSL decryption, but without the error occurring every time. So it was a very good example of how humans react to errors, especially errors that become very common and boring, and they just don't even think about it. But it's pretty important stuff. So you really do need to think about SSL and how it operates and how those certificates are so important in the things that they do. Let's go through some of the questions that you have. I'm going to sift through a number of them just so you can kind of get a feel for the things that are there. Again, these questions are really about anything. They don't have to be about Core 2. They could be about IT. They could be about certifications. They could be about technology in general, or they could be about something that has nothing to do with technology. You can ask whatever question you'd like. I don't know that I would answer any question that you might have, but I'm open for the idea. We'll have a look and see what you got there to be able to have that. In fact, we have one from a good friend, Anonymous. The Anonymous says, "Hi, I'm interested in cybersecurity. What do you recommend the core subjects to focus on as foundations for a career in cybersecurity?" This is a very well-written question, by the way, because it already assumes that you just can't start in the world of IT security. In fact, I'm going to call it IT security and not, although the term is cybersecurity, that tends to be the term that we use in this industry for that particular piece of it. But the term cybersecurity doesn't really have any definition. It's very vague. It's sort of a generic security term, but it doesn't really point to a specific segment or a specific task or a specific problem that's trying to be solved. It's more of a generic term that describes the world of security in technology, which is a very broad term. I like to focus in a little bit more and focus into the world of IT security because that involves dealing with data and dealing with protecting information and firewalls and log files and IPS and preventing anybody from gaining access to this information and protecting the data within the organization. So whenever you hear me talk about the terms cybersecurity, I'm really talking about IT security. One of the things that people want, I think, to be able to do on the network, they want to be able to take and start in the world of IT security. They want to have that as their very first job in the world of technology. The reality is, however, that IT security is a very broad scope of information that requires a lot of knowledge before you're able to even get into understanding the details of that. Let me give you an example. So for someone who's trying to get into the world of IT security, and I'm speaking as someone who was in the world of IT security, specifically next generation firewalls, for about 7 or 8 years. And the focus that we have is we want you to have knowledge of operating systems. We want you to have knowledge of technology in networking, and we need you some knowledge in security. So you need to really, and not just knowledge, not just, hey, I looked over some things this weekend, and now I know everything I need to know about operating systems. Now I know everything I need to know about networking. Nope, that's not it. We're talking about an expert knowledge in those things. You need to learn details about the Windows operating system, how you manage it, what the security features are of Windows, how that applies to operating systems, to file systems, to Microsoft Active Directory. You really have an incredible scope of knowledge that you have to really break down. Authentication, authorizations, all of these things are important in Windows, and you have to really understand the details of that. Well, that's just Windows. Now let's do the same thing in Linux. I need to understand how operating systems work and security in Linux is used. And probably more importantly, I also need to know that for other operating systems like Mac OS, like Android, like iOS, like iPad OS, we need to understand detailed breakdowns of security in those particular operating systems. Well, that's a lot. You could take probably years of time to accumulate the knowledge that you need to really be an expert with security in the world of operating systems. So that's pretty good. The other part that you will find is also, once you get past operating systems, now I need to do the same thing with networking. Networking is also another very important side of IT security. I would say, in fact, probably networking might be just as important, if not more important, than IT security, because with networking, it is all about security. It's about configuring firewalls. Let's say we have multiple firewalls. We are configuring an active firewall and one that's on standby. We need to integrate this with our existing firewalls. Maybe we've got the firewall acting as a layer 3 device, so we don't need a separate router. We'll integrate that into the existing firewall. But then we also need to integrate it into our existing switches. So we need to configure how we're going to have multiple switches in place on these multiple firewalls so that we have some type of redundancy if we happen to have any failures. We also have to configure things like IPsec and VPN technologies. Those are well integrated into firewalls. It's sort of the firewall technology side of things, but we also have to make sure that we're configuring this on the network side of things, like routing protocols. We need to make sure that we have some type of connectivity between locations. How do we make sure that we have the routing set up between one site and another? We also need to think about authentications. What about people that are using the TOTP or other applications on our smartphones? Those might be important for you to know. What about collecting all of the log files? We need a SIM, a security information manager, to be able to track all of this data that's on servers, routers, switches, firewalls, proxies, IPS, and everything else that we might be running. So before we even get into the world of security, we're now dealing with all of the things that we have to learn before we're even putting our little toe into the world of IT security. So my recommendation for people that want to get into security, I loved IT security. I loved working with security. That is something I spend a lot of time doing. And it's something that every day it was exciting and interesting that we got into it. But one of the things we often found was that people want to get into it as quickly as possible, but you can't do that so quickly. You got to really work on the knowledge. You need to build the foundation. Build the foundation of operating systems, build the foundation of networking, build the foundation of security, and then you're ready to get into it. So I think that is where you should focus your effort. I think that is, if you're ever getting into the world of security, that's what I would recommend doing. So that gives you kind of a broad overview of where you should focus. Spend your time and your years working through IT operating systems, Windows, Linux, Mac OS, iPad OS, Android. Then get into the world of networking. If you do anything with packets, the more you do with packet captures and looking at the packet captures, incredibly valuable information. Make sure you understand routing. Make sure you understand switching. Make sure you understand the intricate technologies associated with all of those. And then finally, move into the world of security and understand more about routers and firewalls and VPNs and authentication and log files and all of those things. It will be incredibly important as you get into the world of IT security, because that's where you will be very well established. You will have the foundation and you'll be able to make your plans to be able to get into the world of security. It's a lot of fun, and it is a involved process. It's not something you can simply take a course and now you're in security. You need to build that foundation over time. It could be years before you get it into that, but it's absolutely a amazing use of your time. It is very valuable use of your time. So make sure you get into those pieces. Let's have a look at other questions you might have. We're going to step through other pieces of this. Thank you so much for sending those questions at any time, and you can send those at professormesser.com/QA. We have a number of questions available that you can sift through. Others, speaking of the world of networking, I think this is a good place to go for something like this. Another person, or maybe the same person, anonymous, who asks, "Hello, Messer. I'm currently studying Net Plus, and I'm doing okay on some practice exams. I wanted to know if you use WireShark for the exam, or is it something we could just try for knowledge's sake?" I don't think for Network Plus that you are required to be able to install WireShark and perform packet captures of WireShark. But I will tell you, as somebody who worked in the industry for protocol analysis, I worked probably 7 or 8 years separately. This was 7 or 8 years with Palo Alto Networks. I also worked a number of years with Network General, who was also purchased by Network Associates, which at the time was McAfee, who also divested ourselves back into Network General, who was then purchased by NetScout. This is the way it works in the industry, people. This is, if you ever get into the world of Silicon Valley and these large technology companies, this is normal, just so you know. So about 10 years, I worked with this company as a systems engineer, where I was extremely focused on packet captures, understanding protocols on the network, breaking down reporting, and understanding more about other monitoring functions. So an amazing world once you get into the packet capture side of things. It is one of those skills, by the way, that if you spend your time really understanding how protocol analysis works, how you can view those protocols at that very detailed level of the network, you become very, very knowledgeable in how to look and resolve problems on the network. Everything is there in the packets. This happens all the time. When you go into an organization, there's a problem, and they say, "We're having a slowdown. We think it's the network." Well, most of the time it really isn't the network, because there's way too many moving parts. And many times it's a database server, it's an index, it's a configuration on a router. It's something else that's causing an application to perform poorly. But if you are able to take a packet capture and watch, and many times you're taking a packet capture in multiple places at the same time, you're able to watch the traffic come out of a server, watch the traffic go into another device, and then back again. And you can look at those packet captures and begin to measure what is happening between those. So often you might see the request go out to the server, and then it sits there in the server for 30 seconds, and then finally sends a response back. And they will say, "Well, we think the problem is the network." And then we get to say, "Well, the packets went into the server, and it sat there for a very long time, and then finally came back over the network instantly to the end user." So without having that packet capture, you'd just be guessing, or you would be hoping, or you would be somehow trying to tell people that it's not the network. "Please don't blame us. It's not the network." And they go, "Well, how do you know it's not the network?" "Oh, we don't know." But if you take a packet capture, you know everything. You get to say, "Well, let me show you how it goes. Here's the traffic going through." 30 seconds later, it finally comes out of that server. And very often, this is a very good example of a case we ran into where they were just having these long delays of somebody trying to solve these problems. And it was a problem where they simply did not have a proper indexing of the database. That was it. It was a database issue. It was a SQL issue that the database people needed to know about. So you almost have to be a little bit familiar with almost everything so that you can talk to the database people. Now, granted, a month before this, we got the call that said the network is slow, you have to fix it. we went to the database people and we said, have you checked the index? Have you looked to see if the index was okay? They go, yeah, they did. There's nothing wrong with the index. Stop telling us about the index. Not the index. It's not a problem at all with the index. Okay. All right. Okay. Got it. You're obviously very familiar with making sure that works properly. So we'll let you do that. Then we did all the testing and it turns out it's an index problem. And literally they went back to their desk, did this, click, created an index for the piece, and they went from a 30-second response time to a 2-second response time. Boom, boom. Suddenly, all of these delays were suddenly fixed because someone else had to come in, take a packet capture, place the proper blame, and prove that the blame was there so that someone would finally fix that particular problem. Really valuable stuff. It solves problems instantly. This could have gone on for a very long time if somebody had not sat down and taken the proper packet captures and analyzed the packets to see where the problems were occurring. So I think it's a valuable set of skills, not just in some of the certification exams you take, but these are skills you end up using for the rest of your career. In fact, many times when you run into a problem, you finally get into the world of IT security, you're working on a firewall, and then you run into a bug. And you call tech support. You say, I'm running into this problem with the firewall. I'm having this problem. And they say, oh, did you take a packet capture? Oh, no, I didn't. We need to do that. Because they know the best way to know what's going on is take a packet capture. That's how you do this. So absolutely spend some time understanding WireShark. It will seem insurmountable at first. There's a bit of a curve. There's a bit of a learning curve when it comes to protocol analysis, but it is worth the time stepping through protocol analysis. I believe WireShark has recently introduced a certification program for this, and there's a lot of great tools available for you to step through what those happen to be. So make sure you're familiar with all of that. I think it's a good use of your time. It is not required for you to go through all of that just to pass your A+, your Network Plus, or your Security Plus. That's a little bit outside the scope of what you need to know, but I think it's still valuable information. And it's one of those where if you become very comfortable with taking packet captures, this is something that will take you years to become really, really comfortable with, but it's something that you now have a story and an explanation about things that you have seen or things that you have done at the packet level that makes for a great story when you're ready to sit down with someone in an interview process. And you can talk about WireShark and what you found. And here's a screenshot of it. And here's a report that was created from it. And here's the information that we output so that you have detailed information that will help you in your process and hopefully in your interview so that you can get that job or get a better job. I think it's very valuable, but probably out of scope for the exam itself, just so you're aware of that, just so that works out. Let's do another question. We're getting some great stuff being sent in. You're more than welcome to add that question in with the URL that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Let's keep going through this list. We've got quite a bit that you have here. So this is, we mentioned this earlier, and it's worth talking about because I think it's come up also as people are talking about this. Everything that we've done today has been specific to the 220-1202 exam. This is the 1200 series exams that were introduced in March of this year, 2025, and it is a different set of exam objectives than the 1102. Aaron asks, will this content for 1202 apply to the 1102? Because I'm taking the 1102 soon. And that's why during this event today, I've told you when we take a question, this question applies to both 1102 and 1202. This question is only for the 1202. But also, we've got 3 years worth of 1102 live streams that you can go back and look at. They're all on YouTube. They're all in our playlist. We have a playlist of our everything that we do And we go back years and years and years. So you can go to 3 years worth of the 1102 and you can watch those replays. They're all perfectly valid. They all have exactly the same content as the exam objectives do today. So even though it's 3 years old, it's still up to date for everything that's the 1101 and the 1102. You might want to look at that just to see what those are. Now, how do you know, though, if you have those particular versions? So let's go to the Professor Messer website. I'm going to, on this website, go to the 1202 menu, and I'm going to choose the option for the free 220 1202 Core 2 videos. And look, there's a nice ad from the folks at Google. Thank you, Google. So we're going to have it go through that particular link. And at the bottom of this, or just underneath it, we show you, this is the connection. There is a link here that says, what are the differences between the A+ 1102 and the 1202? And I go through a lot of details in that to be able to work through. Those details give you information about why there are differences in this exam. I break out for you the time frames. Right now, we're in this very separate end where we have 2 different exams that are available at the same time, but you can see the 1101 and 1102 will retire on September the 25th. And obviously the 1201 and 1202 have been around since March 25th. So we've got both of those right here at the moment that we are working through. Something to keep in mind on that chart. But then I also break down for you what is different between these two. And this is one where we have, and it's, let me see if I can get rid of my head that is in the way, just so we can see this for the moment. Here we go. So on the left side, this circle is the one that describes the number of objectives for the 1102. The circle on the right side, which is a little bit bigger, you can see it's larger, is for the objectives on the 220 1202. You'll notice there's 580 bullets. Those objectives, I counted all of them in the exam objectives. 580 in the 1102, 665 in the 1202. It's a little bit bigger. It's not hugely different, but there is a little bit more, and obviously that circle is a little bit bigger. Notice also there's a circle in the middle. We have a yellow on the left, we have a blue on the right, yellow and blue make green right there in the middle, so that 533 objectives are the same between both of those. So there's quite a bit of overlap between these two. One of the things you'll notice, though, is that the yellow that's here are topics from the 1102 that no longer are included with the 1202, and perhaps more importantly, because the 1202 is bigger, there's a lot more topics on the 1202 that are covered into that list. So that's another thing to think about as you get into the details, is that you might run into this. Maybe I could change where I actually am in this view. There's a little bit better view of this. So there's a good example of stepping through what those happen to be. Whenever you start getting into troubleshooting or dealing with these types of challenges with exam objectives, you really do have to make sure you have the right objectives in place and understand the differences of these. That's why I tell people, if you're studying for the 1102, don't study from a book that's for the 1202, because you'll get a lot of information you don't need. Vice versa, if you're studying for the 1202, don't study for the 1102. You'll miss a bunch of data. So another example of why it's so important to keep track of all of those and where they're coming from. So another one that you should absolutely keep in mind and that are super important as you go through the study process for all of these. You'll find that as you start stepping through every 3 years, quite a difference. You might have to get some newer study materials for all of those. Pretty important. Let's keep going through your list. We have more here. I'm going to take a sip really quick. Okay. So this is a question that I will tell you right off, don't have an answer for you, and I'll explain why. This question is from Jacob, who asks, hi, Professor Messer, is it advisable to take Security Plus after you get your A+, or would you have to take your Network Plus? And would you recommend Network Plus or CCNA? So there's a lot going on here. So let's sort of break down where these are coming from and what we're doing here. The answer, as I said, I don't have an answer for you, because whenever you get into the world of IT certifications, you're doing this for a reason. You're not just picking a cert and getting the cert and putting it in your pocket and saying, okay, I got the cert now. what ideally you would be doing is looking at the positions in your particular area of the world, in your particular geography, find out the companies in your area, the organizations in your area, the governmental facilities in your area have jobs that are posted on their websites. On those job postings, they will tell you what they're looking for. And they will be able to answer, oh, we need somebody who is A+ certified. We need somebody who is Network Plus certified. We need somebody who is Security Plus certified. Or they might not even want any of those. That's certainly possible. So arbitrarily picking a cert and saying, yeah, you should do that cert next. Oh, you should do that certification next. We're not doing this to collect certifications. Doesn't help us, at least not initially. We want to be able to pick certifications that match what employers would like us to have. So the answer to what cert do I take next, whatever I tell you is going to be wrong, because I have no idea what the employers in your area would like you to do. I think that's pretty important if you're trying to get a job in IT, that you pick the right things to do. So make sure you focus on that piece of it. So I don't have an answer for you as to which one you should take and when you should take it, because every organization is different. Every organization has a different set of requirements, and you want to be sure that you pick the requirements that are going to be best for you to be able to go out and get that job. So that's why I tell you I don't have an answer to that one. Now, I do sort of have an answer to the one here that says, would I recommend the Network Plus or the CCNA? Those are two very different certification exams. Very different. I mean, one's about networking and the other one's about networking, but that's really about it. There are big divides between those two. They are not interchangeable at all. So I see this on the internet all the time, though, as people say, why would you take your Network Plus when so many organizations are asking about a CCNA? Well, I'm going to take that to next levels. Why would you take a CCNA when so many organizations would like you to have a CCIE? In fact, why are you getting a job in IT at all? Why don't you go ahead and get a job as the CEO? There's a reason that we start and move forward in this industry at a particular pace, because you can't simply jump over everything you need to know and suddenly get a higher level certification, because no one's going to hire you with that higher level certification because you have no lower level knowledge. You have to build up to the CCNA. CCNA is not an entry level certification. It's more of an intermediate level certification. Network Plus is certainly considered an entry level certification in the world of networking. Now, it may be that you want to be able to get to the point of getting your CCNA. Sounds like a great idea, but you need to have that foundation in place so that when you finally make it to the world of CCNA and you go into interview with somebody, that you already have some functional and professional knowledge that you can reference to. You can't just go get a CCNA with no IT experience whatsoever, show up at a company and say, all right, give me your login to all your switches and routers. I got my CCNA. They will never give that to you. They will never hire you. They will never ever want you to touch your switches and router. You haven't even worked at a help desk. You've never even solved problems with operating systems. We don't even know how much of a network you happen to know. And you want us to tell you to log into a switch and router and make configuration changes? That's not going to happen. As much as people want that to happen quickly, nobody's going to do that. Companies are not going to allow that to occur. So eventually you might want to get your CCNA, but it's not something that you would choose that right out of the gate without any other type of certification whatsoever. It's something that you work yourself into, and eventually you'll be able to earn that certification because you've already been working with operating systems for a year. You've already been working with some switches and routers for a little bit of time. Now you've got a higher level cert and people are more comfortable with your knowledge of the technology, and now we can get you into the networking team. That's normally how that process would occur. And I would highly recommend you follow that process because you want to be very careful about overloading yourself with certs. We're not collecting certifications for the sake of having more certifications. There are a lot of people out there that do that kind of thing for some reason, but I think it limits them. Someone who is hiring doesn't want to see just a bunch of certification names when you've never worked in the industry before. You should start at the beginning, work your way into it. And once you get that foot in the door, you can rocket ship yourself as fast as you want to. That's one of the benefits, but you've got to get your foot in the door. You got to get that first job. Then you can start expanding out your knowledge and doing all of those things. It's a process. There's a set of procedures here, and there's things that you have to pace yourself to be able to get to that point. And you can easily do it. You can make it happen, but you have to do it at the right time, in the right organization, with the right part of that organization to be able to get to that process. So that's what I would recommend when it comes to Network Plus and a CCNA. Pick the right thing for the right job and the right set of knowledge that you're working towards. Okay, other materials that you have. There's a lot of things that are here and available. So we have a lot of people are asking about the newer version of the exam. Of course, our website has both the 1100 series training materials. We also have 1200 series training materials. So you will see that on our website that there are both. Some people will see that just one of them and go, oh, well, they only have the 1100 series. Nope, we have both because people need both of those right now. And I have a lot of people that are sending me messages saying, I see that you have the 1100 series. Why are you even bothering with that? The new series is out. Well, that's because there's still a lot of people that are working towards their 1100 series certifications. And trust me, having gone through this multiple times before, people will be taking their 1100 series A+ exams up until the final day. So the reason they are still on our site is because they are still a current version of the A+ certification exam series, and people are still working on those certs. Now, if you're just starting the process, well, obviously you'd probably choose the 1200 series, but what about the other people who've been studying this for 6 months already? You don't want to turn everything off for them. We want to make sure they have all the study materials they need to be able to successfully pass these exams. And I assure you, up until the very last day, they will be doing this. I don't encourage that. I don't condone it. I don't think it's a good idea, but people do that. And sometimes we get great stories. Hey, I took both exams on the last day they were offered and I passed both of them and I'm now A+ certified for 3 years. It's a great story. But I also get stories where people say, I went in to take the final exam on the last day and I failed. And so now I have to restart all over again. Even though I passed one of the exams, now they're retired. I have to start over again and take the 1200 series. And I hate those stories. I hate hearing that, but I think we're all human. We just, it's the way that we work. It's the way that we do this. So I understand why people are doing it. It's the reason we wait until the last minute to do our taxes, that kind of thing. But sometimes that works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well. So that's why that is there. But we have both on our website. So pick the one that's right for whatever you're doing. We've got all the tools you need to make that happen. Let's keep going through this list. Other thing, this is a pretty good question along those lines. This says, hi, I am applying to a college course that will let me skip the first year if I am A+ certified. Already have 2 years of IT experience. Do you think it's possible to pass by the 18th of September? So a little bit earlier than the 25th of September. Now, you've already got 2 years of IT experience. You might be able to do it. I don't know how much of your IT experience revolves around operating systems, troubleshooting Windows, understanding networking, understanding security, breaking down all of the troubleshooting of all of those. But if you're already pretty familiar with those, you could possibly finish this in 2 months. There are people that have come to our site that are been in the industry for a long time. They're very knowledgeable about all of these. They'll spend a week looking at the exam objectives. They'll take their exam. They'll pass it. They'll do that again for another week. So 2 weeks later, they're A+ certified. That's very rare. It's very unusual. And usually it's a scenario like this where the organization they're with or the college that they're trying to get into will use that as a way to increase or rapidly push you through that particular program. There might be a reason for earning that A+ certification, even though you've already been in the industry for a while. So it could be that the knowledge you've accumulated over those last 2 years is everything you need to be able to pass this exam in a week or two, which gives you plenty of time to pass both of those. Now, if you, the 18th of September sounds like that's your deadline. So in that case, probably the 1100 series would be perfectly fine doing that. The 1200 series would also be fine. So you've really got a good choice there. There are probably more training materials out there for the 1100 series if you look outside the scope of just ProfessorMesser.com, which I don't know why you're doing that, but I understand. So you could go out and find many more books, many more training materials for that previous version because it's been out for 3.5 years. The 1200 series exams, there's a number of book publishers that have still not yet released their 1200 series books. So you'll see that just takes time. This process of building the content, editing, publishing, putting it online, it takes a good bit of effort. I spend every day throughout 7 days a week writing all of this content just so we can get it onto the website for you. That is just the normal part of doing this. It just takes a lot of time. So I would recommend that, you could probably do it within, by the 18th of September. Sure, you could probably make that happen. The only way you would really be able to tell is to grab the exam objectives and use it as a checklist. Can you tell me what that bullet does? Can you tell me what the next bullet does? Can you tell me or someone else what that next bullet does? And if you're going through this list and you're very comfortable with the list, and you know about the port numbers, and you know about the devices on the network, and you know about the troubleshooting, and you understand the Windows process, and you know how to troubleshoot Windows when it doesn't boot properly, and you looked at the security aspect, and you're really comfortable with it, then you're probably fine to take these exams. You'll probably do okay. But it's really more about what your knowledge is, and I don't know that. I don't know what your knowledge base is and where it would fit. But that's a good example of how that will apply depending on what you really are doing with those particular pieces of information and what's expected of you on the exam. Let's keep going through this. A lot of good stuff you guys are sending in. By the way, thank you so much for sending those questions. We're going to keep going through that list. Okay. So we're going to put a very specific question in on this. So this is from Anonymous, who says, I know you've spoken before about how exam objectives change from one exam version to another. We've seen that already today. My question is, if one objective name carries over from an old version to a newer one, can we safely assume that the material within that topic stays the same, or could some of the material possibly be added or subtracted? If the best way for me to compare this for you is to look at exam objectives themselves, and this is what I would recommend you do. So if you're ever trying to figure out the details of this, I'm going to bring up the exam objectives for both the 220-1101 and the 220 1102 and the 220-1202, since this is the Core 2 study group. This will be a place to go. And I've already got one of them up already. I'm going to go to the 1102, and that's the study group, the 1102 A+ course. Got this all organized, probably too well. Quite honestly, too many bullets, too many places. So we have 2 exam objectives to look at on this list. I'm going to change my view here. Okay, here we go. We have the 1102 exam objectives, and they are here. And the 1202 exam objectives, there we are, both on the same screen. Now I'm going to skip ahead here. Oh, that is not what I wanted. We're going to skip ahead here to the 1101, and we're going to look at the 1101 and the 1102 and the 1202 right here next to each other. And we're going to start right here. Now, the problem when we compare these two is, although there is a great deal of overlap, there are differences in the domain names. So for example, on the 1101 is mobile devices, and on the 12 or the 110, this is 1101, 1201. I got the wrong one. Let's go the other side, because we're not really comparing the same thing, are we? It's not It's apples and oranges, and we want oranges and oranges. Well, we're in luck because I do have oranges and oranges right here. 1102 should be the same. Here we go. Should be the exact same as we go through this. So we got operating systems for 1102 and operating systems for the 1202. And the first one is identify basic features of Microsoft Windows editions, except in the new one, it's explain common operating system types and their purposes. So that doesn't match. So it's not a one-to-one match. You have to go down a little bit here to section 1.3, where it is compare and contrast basic features of Microsoft Windows, identify basic features of Microsoft Windows. So those are the two similar additions to each other. So for example, this version of the 1102 says Windows 10 editions, Home, Pro, Pro for Workstations, and Enterprise. On the 1202, it's Windows 10 and Windows 11 editions for those, and it has different sets of those. We also have feature differences, domain access versus workgroup, desktop styles, RDP, RAM, BitLocker, GP edit. You'll notice on the newer exam, we have domain versus workgroup, desktop styles, random access memory, BitLocker, GP edit, but it also includes inversions. So they stuck a new bullet in there for that, but almost identical to each other. And everything that is identical between both of those, you can already just naturally assume that those are the same. You do not need to, if you already knew this section of the 1102, then you don't even have to worry about memorizing this information on the 1202 because they are identical to each other. The difference, though, is they added in inversions and they added in specific Windows 11 editions. So we need to learn those. And although they have upgrade paths and they have in-place upgrade, notice the upgrade path and in-place upgrade on the newer version also includes a new bullet for clean install. So it's not always completely identical to each other. Sometimes they slip a new bullet in the middle of all of this. So you do have to look at that. And they added in a new section for hardware requirements, TPM and UEFI, which really came from a different area, and they just moved it to this particular section. So I created a spreadsheet of all of this and compared and contrasted both of these. I went through the 1102 and I found out what had been dropped. I went to the 1202, I found out what had been added, and I stuck them all together. I really calculated all of that to a very specific detail. So that's what I do to determine, am I really looking at information that is the same between both of these exams? And you could do the same thing, and you probably should do the same thing, where you can go through and understand what are the differences between these versions, what has been changed, what is new, what are the things that I should worry about. They're listed and they're part of the exam objectives, and you can really compare and contrast as you go. Generally speaking, for the most part, if it is identical on both, then pretty much it's identical. You don't have any differences between those two. And as you saw with our Venn diagram, those two circles between each other, there was a lot of duplication between those two. There was that green in the middle, and that was a big green section in the middle to worry about. So that's what I would recommend you doing as well. And now we're at the top of the hour. I do want to get through another question and have those there. For the same reason that we just mentioned, Elizabeth has a question. Says, I started to study for the 1102. I've decided to switch to the 1202. Can I still use my 1102 book, or is that information mostly outdated? Well, that's really two different things you asked. Can you still use your 1102 book? You could, but you're missing a lot of new information, and you're studying things that are no longer part of the 1202 exam. And the next part of that question is that information mostly outdated? Well, it's not mostly outdated. If we go back to the chart that we had, we can see that the big green circle in the middle is the same between both of them. But if you were to study from 1100 series materials, you'd only be studying the left-hand circle. Look at all the stuff you missed. And look at the little sliver of information you no longer need to know. So those are important considerations, and they should be considered when you're planning your studies, because that's why I tell people you should never study from materials that are different than the version of the exam you're planning to take. You should always study from materials that match perfectly with the version of the exam that you're going to take, because sometimes it comes down to a point, 5 points, would be the difference between you passing or not passing. Why would you risk that for the cost of a book? That's it. The books are relatively inexpensive when you look at the price of the exam itself. Wouldn't you want to study for things that are very accurate to what is going to be covered on the exam? Of course you would. So that's why I tell people, just take your old stuff, throw it out. Go, if you're going to take the 1201 exam and the 1202 exam, get materials specifically written for the 1201 exam and the 1202 exam. Don't use older materials for newer exams and vice versa. Not worth it. Not something you should be doing. Certainly doesn't set you up for success. And that's what I want you to do, is set yourself up for all of the success that you're going to have. Why would you study for information that is never going to appear in your exam? Or wouldn't it be awful to be in your exam and suddenly you're surprised by the things you're reading? Like, what do you mean AI? What do you mean an AI hallucination? What do you mean AI bias? That was never in my book. That's right. It wasn't, because those are new topics. And that's not the only ones. There's a lot of new topics on the exam. You don't want to be stuck with that. That would be a bad idea. So make sure you are familiar with all of those. Let's go into other pieces of this. We have a lot here. I know we're at the top. I want to fit just one more in if we can. This is a bit of a challenge. I'm going to bring this one up because I saw someone wrote something on Reddit. I just saw it today, and it was on a subreddit that had to do with getting jobs. And this person said that they changed their resume to be very, very, very different than the traditional resume. I bring this up because Carl wrote and asked, I'm trying to get my first help desk job. How do I bypass this AI resume stuff? I don't know if you can bypass it so much. But one of the things that we have found, one of the things that you have found, is that these automated processes that companies have set up have been relatively aggressive over the last year. They have really started tightening up what they find acceptable in these resumes that are submitted. Now, sometimes companies will simply put a job posting out there that they have no intention of filling. This happens a lot, unfortunately. I'm not talking about those situations. Let's just look at a company that really does need to hire people for their help desk, that they are a legitimate company. They have an open position. They will be filling that open position, and they have asked people to send in their resumes. What this person was saying, and I'm gonna find this on the because I saved it on the Reddit configuration. I just have to find it in my profile under my saved items to find all of the saved. I found it. This was in the Get Employed subreddit. Get Employed. And the title of this article is, I stopped getting ghosted when I added one stupid link to my resume. Sounds kind of like a hook. Sounds like a fakey kind of thing, but it isn't. It's actually a pretty good article that they wrote about what they changed. And some of the things were interesting to me. And I think it's perhaps even worth considering is that they changed the format of their resume dramatically. And instead of focusing on their traditional resume that starts with a resume objective, which I never recommend you use. It's just sort of pointless. You have a cover letter for that. You should be using cover letters if you haven't. The thing that they changed was, instead of simply putting the list of every possible thing that they ever did in the industry and every possible topic that they ever covered as part of their job, what they did instead was show screenshots and explanations of things they actually did. So it's not just a text description. As a system administrator, I was responsible for managing the system that provided the user names. But nobody wants to read that. The hiring managers don't want to read that. And what this person decided to do was, instead of writing that, they put a screenshot. And at the bottom of the screenshot, they put an explanation of what they did. And then they put a link to a website that had all of the documentation and reports of what they did for that particular job function. That's a pretty bold change. It goes outside the scope of what they would normally do. But it got people's attention because people eventually do read through these resumes. Yeah, there's some of automated processes where they go through and read through that part of it. But when you get a human to look at it, it's a resume type that suddenly pops on their screen. And now it's different than anything else they've seen so far, and bold enough to have the evidence. They've got the receipts. They've got the details of what their job had and what they did. And here's the screenshots, here's the graphics, here's the reports, here's more information that you can read about it. And according to the article that they posted in that subreddit, they found that it was an advantage for them. You know, it didn't suddenly change and suddenly getting hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, but they were getting more attention to that resume than they had in the past. So that was a pretty good one to be able to think about that, where it comes from. I thought that was a pretty bold idea and not a bad idea, quite honestly. I've mentioned to you through the years that one of the best things you can do is to put practical information on your resume. Instead of describing what you do day to day, describe why you do this day to day. Describe why this is valuable, this knowledge that you have. Describe what this knowledge did for your organization. Did it save money? Did it save time? Did it create new capabilities? Did it create new opportunities? That's what you need to tell people about. Everybody knows that you were able to take phone calls, answer questions from people, and update passwords. They got that. But how did that make a difference for the people that you work with now? How is this valuable to somebody who's planning to hire you? That was the part that I thought was really interesting. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, a lot of different things that people are doing to approach these ideas. And I think it's worth thinking about because it's a real challenging market out there to get that very first job in IT. Once you get the first job, it's so much easier. It is so much easier. But that very first position is a huge challenge. So you have to be smart. You have to be strategic. You have to think about who's going to hire me. What are they looking for? How can I adjust my resume and my cover letter to match what they're looking for? And how can I catch their eye? And of course, it's not just about your resume. As I mentioned, there's a link in the YouTube video description of this video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. It's a 30-minute video. I realize that's a long time in the world of YouTube. But as you know, with my video series, there's not a lot of fluff. There's not a lot of dead air. We're not playing music and showing slideshows. I'm giving you detailed information, and I'm just shotgunning that information to you constantly. But I talk about how valuable it is to have a good resume, but also to have a good relationship with the people in the industry. So how many user group meetings have you been to in your area? How many Microsoft user group meetings have you been to? How many Cisco user group meetings have you been to? How many Palo Alto Networks user group meetings have you been to? How many Checkpoint user group meetings have you been to? Have you met the people in your area that are doing this for a living? And have you introduced yourself? Have you given them your resume? Have you asked them what positions are available at their organizations? Have you asked them if they're planning to hire? Do they have new projects going on? And have you tried the pizza? That's what you do at these meetings. You meet these people and you get into the world of that relationship between all of them. People like to hire people they know. And I'm not talking about a family member. I'm not talking about someone who hangs out with them on the weekend. I mean just a professional acquaintance. You know of this person. You have people in your organization that have worked with that person, or you've met them at a user group meeting and they can vouch for you. That becomes valuable when you get to the point of interviewing with that organization, because you could say, yep, I found out about this position because I met Fred at the Microsoft user group meeting. We were talking about Active Directory, and he said, you guys have an extensive Active Directory implementation. You just bought a new company. So now you have multiple for us. You need to blend those together. There's a big need to provide support for those. You need to hire people with the support, and I've got the knowledge that can do that. That's what you need to present. It's not just about you. It's not just about your resume. It's not just about your education. It's not just about the things you have done. Sometimes it really is about the people that you know along with all of that. And it's not any one thing. It's the combination of all of those things working together. And hopefully that gives you some ideas about how you should be setting up your strategy for that first job, how you should be building out your resume. Maybe you do an A/B test. Maybe you send some resumes in the old style and you send other resumes in the new style. Which one is working better? Another thing this person mentioned I thought was great is they kept track of every single job they submitted a resume for. So they documented and kept a spreadsheet of every single one they sent and what the disposition was of that. Did they never hear from them again? Did they get the first call? Did they then ghost them? Did they go through a separate set of interviews? And they said by documenting this, they could see that they were making progress. This wasn't just them sending out resumes into the ether and hoping for manna to fall from the heavens that they would then earn that position. Instead, they were actively tracking, monitoring, seeing where these things go, and it was giving them a purpose and an understanding of what was happening throughout this entire process, and they thought that was valuable. So there were some very interesting things that they added into that mix. Maybe that's a set of interesting things that might help you also with your job hunt. Well, we're well past the top of the hour, so I think that's probably a great place to stop in this particular study group. I want to thank everyone for joining us on our 220-1202 A+ study group today. Of course, we have study groups available throughout the month. We have 2 more study groups this month for our Network Plus and Security Plus. And of course, we have our next month's study groups coming up as well. If you ever want to know when the next study group is going to be, simply head over to our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. We could not do these study groups without you. Thank you so much for joining us today and having a little bit of fun and learning, hopefully, along the way of the things that we need to know to be able to earn your A+ certification. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.